And they did talk about that in some of the discussions about like why we have weddings. Like you could just have like you and I can just sit down, like sign them. We're married now. We signed the contract, but everybody like there's like witnesses,
right?
And whatever, like
you watch my husband now.
yeah. And that's the thing is, it's like both people
you can't pretend you didn't know.
Yeah, it's a mutually assured destruction thing. It's like I promise I will commit to that, and I'm gonna follow through.
Right.
Prove it to you. I'm gonna make all these people watch me say it.
Right.
They're all and it's gonna be really embarrassing for me if all these people find out that I fell through on that commitment.
It's true.
And so, in addition to like the legal consequences, there's also the social
pressure.
stigma, the fear, the embarrassment of like, I really gotta like, people are gonna think less of me if I mess this up.
They will.
Well, but again, like, and not to rehash the same stuff, but I allude to some of this content in my bonus episode on like generations and how marriage has changed over the last 100 years. But now that we have no fault divorce, it is easier for the government to be like, oh, well, you don't want to be married anymore. That's fine.
Right.
Whereas for all of human history until 50 years ago, they were like, no. You guys agreed to be married.
Right.
Unless somebody can prove to a judge that somebody here did something illegal. In other words, adultery or like refusing to provide sustenance to the other partner or whatever, like something that the state would be like, yeah, you can't do that.
Right.
Now you're allowed to get a divorce. Otherwise, like, nah, tough. Figure it out.
Well, what do you think that was why was the state interested in marriages staying together?
Well, I think there's two things. One, again, if you think about it just as a contract, like judges are in the business of enforcing other people's contracts. Like the government doesn't make anybody make contracts, but once you make one, then you can take somebody to court and be like, hey, we had this agreement. This guy broke the rules.
Right.
He was supposed to deliver 100 widgets. He only delivered 50. I wanted to pay me for 50 widgets.
Right.
Similarly, you'd be like, hey, judge, we were supposed to be married. This deadbeat over here won't like put food on the table.
Right.
I want you to make him give me money.
Well, that's why I understand that piece, but it's
enforceable contract.
But like there is, I mean, I would argue that there are other contracts where if both parties mutually agree, hey, we don't want this contract to be in place anymore, and the government's like, okay, but with marriage they were not. Right. They were like, well, tell us why not, and we'll tell you whether we think that's okay. So why would they add that added layer? Does it have to do with?
I think there's two reasons. I think one is the children.
Right.
I think that's the obvious one, right? Because the children have an interest in their parents staying married, even if the children don't know that. But like the state on behalf of the children is like, no. You guys have made a commitment to pool your resources and your energy and effort and all that.
Right.
It's like to bring these children up, and we, the state, aren't going to let you leave these kids hanging. So I think that's the obvious thing. I think the secondary thing, though, that all of this kind of builds toward is a lot of what we think about with people choosing to get married, and even when we think about people who are like, whether or not they're going to get divorced, and like all the, having kids. We're thinking about like people in their young adult and, sort of prime years or middle-aged years.
Right.
The other thing is, if you think that part of the commitment is like, well, we're in this thing forever, because one, if we have kids, then we're their parents forever, even if they're adults. But two, if we're saying we're both involved in this like mutual development and enrichment and like helping one another become the best version of ourselves. Yeah. Again, you don't want people being like, well, as long as you're still like are thin and look good. But if you're like, if you let yourself go, I'm not that interested in like helping you develop. Right. And so like you want young people to be able to make themselves like, even when I'm old and fat, I want you to still be with me. And I promise in return, when you're old and fat, I'll still be with you too.
So that's magic.
Yeah. But again, so it's like you have to think, so then if you're the state, you're like, listen, I don't want a bunch of middle-aged and elderly fat people with no support system.
Yeah.
I don't want all these homeless people being kicked out of the house by their better looking, fitter spouse who found somebody younger.
Gosh.
It'd be an eyesore if there were a lot of like old men living on benches because their wives were like, well, there's this tennis instructor.
This has gone so
whatever,
far
you
off track.
Well, but all of that is to say, like, no. Like, it's better if we all
Yeah.